Students, in this video we'll discuss about the cranial nerves, 9th, 8th, 10th, 11th and 12th nerve. So first we discuss the 8th cranial nerve, which is known as vestibulocochlear nerve. This vestibulocochlear nerve, it arises from brain stem. Brain stem में भी ये कहाँ से arise करती है? It is purely, first of all, it is purely it is meant for the balance of body and hearing. It is concerned for hearing and balancing of the body. It arises from pontomedullary junction. The nucleus is situated at the level of pontomedullary junction. Then from the brain stem, it leaves and comes into the cranial cavity in the posterior cranial fossa, and along with the 7th nerve, along with the 7th cranial nerve, that means facial and labyrinthine vessels, it will pass through this foramen. This is the internal acoustic foramen on both sides, and through this it will enter into the ear. In the petrous part of the temporal bone, this is the petrous part of the temporal bone, internal ear and the middle ear, they are situated. So this 8th cranial nerve will enter through this internal acoustic meatus into the ear, along with facial nerve and labyrinthine vessels. Now we come to the 9th cranial nerve, which is known as the glossopharyngeal nerve. This glossopharyngeal nerve is mixed cranial nerve, and it is predominantly sensory. Okay, so where it will arise? It arises from this is the pons, okay, and this is the medulla, which I am drawing. Here is the olive and this is the pyramid. Okay, so 9th, and this is the olive. This medial elevation is pyramid. This sulcus is anterolateral sulcus, and this sulcus is posterolateral sulcus. So this 9th nerve, it arises from the posterolateral sulcus, which is present between the olive and the inferior cerebellar peduncle. So from above downwards, 9th nerve, then 10th nerve, then 11th cranial nerves, they will arise. 9th, 10th and 11th, above downwards, they will arise from the posterolateral sulcus, which is situated between the olive and the inferior cerebellar peduncle. So after emerging from this sulcus, along with the 10th and the 11th cranial nerve, it will reach to the brain stem it will reach to the cranial cavity after leaving the brainstem, and this foramen, as you see here, this is the jugular foramen. This complete is a jugular foramen. All these three nerves, they will pass through this jugular foramen, through the middle part of the jugular foramen. Jugular foramen is divided into three parts: anterior part, middle part, and the posterior part. So from the middle part, all three nerves will pass. 9th nerve, 10th nerve, and 11th cranial nerve, they will pass through the middle part of the jugular foramen. After coming into the neck region, this 9th nerve, it will supply the one muscle, stylopharyngeus muscle, which is the pharynx muscle hai. Only one muscle, this stylopharyngeus muscle, is supplied by the 9th cranial nerve. 9th cranial nerve supply only one muscle, which is stylopharyngeus. It takes the sensation, general as well as taste sensations from posterior 1/3 of tongue. So it carries general sensations as well as the taste sensations from the posterior 1/3 of the tongue. Through its lesser petrosal nervia branch, it convey preganglionic, parasympathetic fibers to parotid gland and act as a secretomotor in nature. So this is about the important points in relation to the 9th cranial nerve. Now we come to the 10th cranial nerve, which is known as vagus. Vagus, it is mixed cranial nerve. Okay, and as already told you, the nucleus is situated in the medulla. This is the medulla. Medulla में भी इसके रूटलेट्स कहाँ से राइज करते हैं? From the posterolateral sulcus. This nerve is 10th cranial nerve's rootlets. Okay, the rootlets will arise from the posterolateral sulcus. The relation above will be the rootlets of the 9th cranial nerve, and below will be the 11th cranial nerve rootlets. The nucleus is present in the medulla. So after emerging from the medulla, this nerve, 10th cranial nerve, okay, this nerve has got two roots. It has two roots होते हैं. One is sensory root and another is the motor root. Sorry, No. Sorry, vagus nerve is it arises from this medulla, and after emerging from the medulla, it enters with the, already told you, 9th nerve and the 11th nerve it will pass through the jugular foramen. It will pass through jugular foramen from the middle part of the jugular foramen and come into the neck region, right side and left side also, and then it will pass through the jugular foramen. It will reach up to the root of the neck. Root of the neck पे पहुँच के what it will do, it enters into the thorax. Enters into thorax में ये enter करती है. Okay. One important point is, right जो vagus होती है, it enters into the thorax by crossing in front of right subclavian artery, while जो left vagus होती है, it enters into the thorax passing in between the left common carotid artery and left subclavian artery. एक तो ये दोनों में डिफरेंस है. How vagus will enter into the thorax. Right side vagus will enter into the thorax by crossing in front of the right subclavian artery, while the left vagus will enter into the thorax passing between the left common carotid artery and the left subclavian artery. This one is a very important point, and this vagus will supply with the muscles of larynx, pharynx and palate, along with the cranial part of the accessory nerve. के थ्रू इट विल सप्लाई. ओके, फेरिंग्स में किसको सप्लाई नहीं करती है ये? स्टाइलो फेरिंजियस को, विच इज सप्लाइड बाय 9th क्रेनियल नर्व. पैलेट में कौन सी मसल इससे सप्लाइड नहीं होगी? टेंसर पैलेटाई, विच इज सप्लाइड बाय मैंडिबुलर नर्व. Okay, so it supply the muscles of larynx, pharynx and the palate except stylopharyngeus, which is supplied by the 9th cranial nerve, and except in case of the palate, tensor villi palatini, which is supplied by the mandibular nerve. Okay, so this is about the 10th cranial nerve. After the 10th, which nerve will come? 11th cranial nerve. 11th cranial nerve is known as accessory. It is purely motor nerve. It has two roots, sensory and cranial. दो पार्ट होते हैं इसके. तो cranial part of the accessory nerve will arise. Okay, it will arise from the medulla. Already told you, from the posterolateral sulcus in relation with 9th and 10th cranial nerves. 9th and crane, they will lie above the cranial part of the accessory nerve. Arises from the nucleus is present in the medulla. Okay, then spinal part जो होता है, spinal root, it will arises from the upper 5 cervical spinal, upper 5 spinal cervical spinal segments. spinal cord से arise करते हैं. स्पाइनल कॉर्ड से राइज करने के बाद all the spinal rootlets, they combine together and they have to come into the cranial cavity. Okay, here. So how they will come? This foramen is foramen magnum, this larger foramen. So this spinal part of the accessory nerve has to enter into this cranial cavity by passing, entering through the foramen magnum. It will enter through the foramen magnum and come into this cranial cavity, posterior cranial fossa. यहाँ पर ऑलरेडी कौन सा रूट है हमारा? क्रेनियल रूट, जो कहाँ से अराइज करता है? मेडुला से. इट विल ऑल्सो कम इनटू द क्रेनियल कैविटी. बोथ द रूट्स दे विल पास टुवर्ड्स द jugular foramen, okay, into the middle part of the jugular foramen, and they will pass through the jugular foramen along with the 9th nerve and the 10th cranial nerve. When they leave the jugular foramen, immediately cranial part, for example, this is the jugular foramen, okay, cranial part coming from the medulla, spinal part coming from the spinal cord. Both the part, they will pass through the middle part of the jugular foramen, okay. When they leave the jugular foramen, immediately the cranial part, this is the cranial part, both they will get separated. This cranial root या cranial part of the accessory nerve will join with, क्योंकि इससे और कौन कौन सी nerves निकल साथ में आती हैं? 10th और 9th cranial nerve. They will also pass through the jugular foramen. तो 10th के साथ ही it will join. तो cranial part of the accessory nerve will join with, this is the cranial part, and this is the 10th cranium. It will join with the vagus nerve and supply the muscles of pharynx, larynx and soft palate. Except pharynx में कौन सी muscle supply नहीं होगी, वही same stylopharyngeus which is supplied by 9th nerve, and here which muscle not supplied by this, tensor palati, which is supplied by mandibular nerve. What happens to the spinal part? This is the spinal part. After coming out from the jugular foramen, this will enter into the spinal part of the accessory nerve. It will enter into posterior triangle of neck, and it supplies the कौन सी muscle? Sternocleidomastoid muscle and trapezius muscle, and it will terminate. The spinal part of the accessory nerve supply two muscles which are forming the boundary of posterior triangle, sternocleidomastoid and trapezius muscle, and it will terminate. And the cranial part of the accessory nerve, what it will do with the vagus nerve, it will supply the muscles of the pharynx, larynx and the soft palate, except stylopharyngeus muscle which is supplied by the 9th cranial nerve, and except the tensor villi palatini muscle which is supplied by the mandibular nerve. So this is about the 11th cranial nerve. Now we come to the 12th cranial nerve, which is hypoglossal nerve. Is the 12th cranial nerve. Okay, this 12th cranial nerve is also purely motor, and it supplies the muscles of tongue, extrinsic as well as intrinsic muscles. They are supplied by 12th cranial nerve. इसका न्यूक्लियस कहाँ प्रेजेंट होता है? इन द मेडुला में, बिटवीन द पिरामिड एंड ऑलिव, एंटीरोलैटरल सल्कस. Anterolateral sulcus between the here. The nucleus will lie here. This is the pyramid, this is the olive. The 12th nerve nucleus will arise from the anterolateral sulcus. So this is the 12th cranial nerve. Okay, it will arises, rootlets will arises from the anterolateral sulcus, and it will form a common trunk, and then it will come into the cranial cavity, and it will pass through this canal. As you see here, these are the occipital condyles. Occipital condyles के anterior aspect पर this canal is present, as you see here. Here also this one. Okay, this is the jugular foramen and this is the condylar canal, yeah, hypoglossal canal. This is the hypoglossal canal here, and here also you can see very easily. This is the hypoglossal canal. It is also known as anterior condylar canal. Anterior condylar canal or hypoglossal canal. So this nerve will come out into the neck by passing through this anterior condylar canal. Okay, it will enter and it will reach to the tongue and supply the muscles of extrinsic and intrinsic muscles of the all muscles of tongue except palatoglossus, which is supplied by cranial part of accessory nerve through pharyngeal plexus. Okay, all muscles of the tongue are supplied by the hypoglossal nerve except palatoglossus, which is supplied by cranial part of accessory nerve through pharyngeal plexus. So this is all about the cranial nerves. So some important points which I want to discuss again, some dictums. Number 1, all extra ocular muscles of eyeball supplied by third cranial, means oculomotor, except, कैसे याद करेंगे आप, SO4 LR6. SO4 का मतलब क्या है, सुपीरियर oblique by fourth cranial nerve, and LR stands for lateral rectus by sixth cranial nerve. The superior oblique supplied by the trochlear nerve, which is fourth, and lateral rectus supplied by the sixth cranial nerve, which is abducent nerve. Number 2 point, all muscles of tongue, extrinsic and intrinsic, all supplied by hypoglossal nerve, which is also known as 12th cranial nerve, except palatoglossus, which is supplied by cranial part of accessory nerve through pharyngeal plexus. Number 3 point, all muscles of soft palate supplied by cranial part of accessory nerve through pharyngeal plexus, except which muscle, soft palate की, tensor villi palatina या tensor palati, which is supplied by which nerve,